The presentation primarily is going to focus on eSettlements. We're going to talk about the supplier portal and how that ties to eSettlements. And we are going to actually talk about eSupplier connection just for a split second as well, to kind of differentiate and understand the differences in eSettlements and eSupplier connection, because I think there's a lot of crossover there. And we get a lot of questions from clients around that. But the main presentation is going to be on eSettlements module. And then at the end, there'll be a demo. So I'm going to go through the slides, talk about what it is. Then we're going to get into the environment, look at what it looks like from a supplier's perspective. And then we'll do a Q&A at the end. So let's get started. All right, so here's the agenda. As I just said, we're going to do an overview of eSettlements. What is it? What is the difference between eSettlements and eSupplier connection? Then we're going to talk about the Comprehensive Supplier Portal, what it is and how it ties into what eSettlements is. And then we're going to get into the primary content around eSettlements itself. So we're going to talk about the benefits, some of the setup and configuration that goes into making it work. We're not going to get too deep into that, obviously. We're going to look at invoice entry and the options around that, the invoice and payment inquiry system, and then additional features that are with the modules. So, and then like I said, at the end, we'll have a little Q&A, hopefully 10 minutes or so. Like I said, I will kind of move quickly through this material. So for what eSettlements is, I got this out of PeopleBooks. I like this. I think it's a very good description of what it is if you don't have a clue what we're talking about. So it basically allows you to optimize the settlement process with electronic invoices and payments, matching online approval and dispute resolution along with email notifications to allow you to streamline your invoice processing, dispute resolution, take advantage of early payment discounts, and extend self-service tools to your suppliers. So that's a lot in one big sentence there, but I find that it's a pretty good description in a matter of a couple sentences of what everything this module does and attempts to accomplish. I've got a process flow here. We'll get back to that later, actually. All right, so first, let's separate what eSupplier connection is, what that actual module is called, and what eSettlements is and the differences, because we tend to get a lot of overlap here and clients get confused between what's included in each. So eSettlements is really a focus around payables. It has your agreement with your suppliers, it has your purchase orders and your receipts if you're in business service provider model only. So you can actually enter purchase orders and receipts in eSettlements, again, if you're using that model. And we'll talk about the models in a minute. And I will mention that most organizations aren't going to run business service provider model, but we'll talk about the models in a minute. It has the ability to process invoices, so enter them, approve them, dispute them. And it has dynamic discounting with proposals on discount resolution of invoicing. And then it has the ability to view invoices and payments. As opposed to eSupplier connection, which is really more around the supply chain side of things. So this has your request for quote, your purchase order acknowledgement, advanced shipping notices, and then it has review account activity. And this is where the crossover and people tend to get confused. You can see payments and invoices and account balances in eSupplier connection, the same as you can see them in eSettlements. The difference being you can't enter those things in eSupplier connection. So I can't go in and enter an invoice like I can in eSettlements. So it's really more around the supply chain side of things. And eSettlements is really more around getting those invoices in and getting payments out the door. So it's something to keep in mind as you're considering which of these modules you might want to implement and what their values are. I think eSettlements and eSupplier connection are both great modules, especially eSettlements. If you're in a situation where you're running PeopleSoft and you've got a lot of modules and you're looking, you're not ready to move to cloud yet, you're looking to add something to your PeopleSoft stack that adds a lot of value. This is a module that not a lot of people have that I think provides a ton of value, especially for your AP team, to streamline their processes and create a better connection with you and your suppliers. So the third piece to this then between eSettlements and eSupplier is the Comprehensive Supplier Portal. So what is that? The Comprehensive Supplier Portal was provided as a complete fluid solution to the supplier portal. Prior to the fluid days, there was a portal out there. It's in the old classic pages. It wasn't great and it didn't really encompass all of the modules that are available in the portal. So they added the portal in Image 31 as a fluid solution and what they call comprehensive. So it's both pieces. And this is included with your AP license. So you actually don't need eSettlements or eSupplier to have the Comprehensive Supplier Portal. Now, without those modules, there's not much your suppliers can do in the portal. It's pretty empty. I have seen people use the portal and make custom apps inside of it for your suppliers without adding a module. But ideally, you would, it's there to be the infrastructure for eSettlements and eSupplier connection to run underneath, but you do have it out of the box with AP. This Comprehensive Supplier Portal is two pieces. So you have what's called the public homepage and you have what's called the secure homepage. There's a screenshot there on the right of what the secure homepage is. And we're going to look at these when we get into the demo, what those look like. But your public homepage is that outward facing external where your suppliers can come and get a login screen basically and get some additional public information before they log into the secure homepage, which gives them the ability to actually, work on the transactions. So in a little more detail going into that, you have the public homepage first, which again, part of using this, of course, is exposing this to the web. So there is a security piece to this, and some organizations, are often weary of exposing their instance. You do create a separate portal inside of PeopleSoft when you build this. So you're actually, exposing less of the application than you think. You're not exposing everything to the web, but you do have to make this outward facing on the internet so that your users can get to it typically through a link from your website. And they come into this public homepage where they have access to, I said, some public things like announcements, events you have coming up, an FAQ, contact information. Bidding, if you use bidding, is in here, public bidding opportunities if you're a bid-based organization. And then you have your supplier and user registration where they can, again, register as a supplier. So new suppliers can come to your public homepage and register themselves, so you don't have to do that for them. We're going to look at that in a minute. They can also request new user IDs if they're already a supplier with you and they want to log in to get into your portal. So this is a pretty basic front end page with some details that are public facing that allow you to look at some information before you sign into the secure side. The secure homepage, then once they've logged in, so now they've got their login credentials, they get into your system, they are now on the secure side where they can do transactional transactions on the data and review the data as well. So they can manage their profile data here. They have access to eSettlements and additional supplier facing portal modules. And when I say that, I mean eSupplier connection, like we just talked about. So they have access to the modules. If you have them licensed and you have them installed, they would have access inside the secure portal. And when we look at the secure homepage, you'll see there are some links on there that are all eSupplier and there are some that are all eSettlements, but they're both available if you have both turned on. Next up, we have supplier onboarding. So again, this is what we talked about before. And again, we're not even in eSettlements at the moment. We're just talking about the Comprehensive Supplier Portal. And with that, you can do supplier onboarding. So you get supplier registration, you get supplier change requests. And so, with supplier registration, as we'll see in a bit, a new supplier that wants to be a supplier with you can go in and fill out the registration process. You can also point them toward this within your organization. So if you don't want someone having to call these suppliers up or take a call and enter all this on the back end, you can have the supplier provide all their information, their payment details, their addresses, their contacts through the registration. And a lot of organizations, when they go to this type of onboarding, I usually recommend that the supplier registration and change requests get used by their internal team too. Their data entry people could actually use these registrations and change requests to enter new suppliers and make changes to them, because you get all the attached workflow and all of that stuff as well. And that's in the key features here. I've mentioned that one, it's very configurable using templates. You don't need a lot of customization. They have supplier registration and change request templates, so you can choose all the fields you want them to be able to enter or not enter, or required or not required. They can attach onboarding documents. So if you require any tax documents, things like that, they can attach them right there inside of it. So again, saving you the steps of having someone have to go retrieve that document. All the workflow is integrated as well. So you get that kind of approval, and you can set that up using the workflow engine at whatever level of approval you want. If you want multiple approvers or a single approver, or auto approve so that all suppliers get automatically just added to your supplier list. I skipped over the supplier change request there. So again, once a supplier exists, they can submit a change request, or your internal team can submit a change request that just makes a change to an effective data change to their supplier details. And again, we will look at the registration screen in its entirety and show you all the possible fields that they can enter when they're doing that. One last thing I like to mention, some of the images and what features came. So in image 33 and 38, they added editor mode, which was a big requested feature. And I've had some clients that actually customized to build this, but prior to it existing. But editor mode allows them to submit their details. You have a middleman editor in your team that reviews all their registration details, can reach out to the supplier if clarifications are needed. and then submits it on for approval. So kind of puts another layer of eyes on a request when it comes in by someone that can actually make a change to. So if they notice a document isn't loaded right, or they notice something's missing on the address, they can call that supplier and say, hey, we got your registration, but we need some additional information. So that was a nice feature that they added both to registrations and change requests in 33 and 38. Again, depending on which images you're on, you have to keep in mind what's available here. But that is one of the major last updates they've made. I looked about the last 10 pumps to see if any eSettlements updates are being made, and I haven't seen anything new from Oracle. So these are the last kind of big things they added to this process. So what are the benefits of eSettlements? So first off, invoice entry can be done by your supplier, right? Your suppliers can go into your portal, they can enter their own invoices. This can save you data entry. If you're doing manual data entry on your end by a lot of AP clerks, then you can definitely reduce that, make the supplier enter those invoices accordingly. It also allows the suppliers to view their invoice and payment details. And I highlight this one because this is everybody's favorite feature. This reduces their need again to contact your AP team. So your team doesn't get inundated with calls about where the payment is. Did you get the invoice? They can go into the portal. They can see their invoices. They can see if there's a dispute. They can see if a payment's been issued and all of that information. So it really cuts down on the time your AP team is taking to work through these kind of issues. And I said that's everybody's probably favorite feature as I've implemented this at various clients. It also has dynamic discounting. This feature is hit or miss. This reduces the cost through negotiating payments and terms. So you can basically say, hey, you've got these 3 invoices. Can we come to a discounted agreement if we're willing to pay them now, if we're willing to pay them with cash, if we're willing to pay them sooner, kind of thing. Some organizations love this feature. They think it's great. They want to go out there and do dynamic discounting to get money quickly. And others, don't really, they already have often their discounting terms in place at an organizational level, and they don't need this kind of dynamic discounting where they're doing one-off proposals with their suppliers. Reduction of paper through various electronic ways of entering invoices. We're going to look at the various options for entering invoices. This does reduce your paper. You don't have to work in as many manual data entry situations for invoices. You can get them into the system in a number of ways we'll look at. There's minimal to no customization effort. It's a low implementation effort. I always say this is a great module if you're trying to add a new bolt on to PeopleSoft, because there's not a lot you need to do. This it sits completely separate from your payables today, and it has a lot of built-in features. So you don't, it's very easy to stand up and start using, and very low cost as far as that customization or any kind of effort like that, even if you're highly customized on your AP side. And then lastly, this improves supplier relations, transparency, and cooperation. It's 2024 now. Everyone expects portals, right? So your clients are going, or your suppliers are going to like you if they can get into your portal and see things themselves, and they don't have to call somebody on the phone and do it. It just improves that relationship, that transparency, and that cooperation you have with them. So I think that's another big feature of kind of this more modernized way of dealing with suppliers. So getting this set up a little bit, we talked about model. There are 2 models: buyer direct, which is your organization is buying from your suppliers. Also has business service provider model, where you are the service provider in the middle between suppliers and buyers, and you're matching them up. As I said earlier, not very many people use business service provider model, but if you have a business organization where you do that kind of thing, where you're the middleman putting buyers and suppliers together, you can run eSettlements to do that. But 99% of organizations are just buyer direct, where you're buying from your suppliers. So just important to keep in mind as we look through some of the features. Everything in the demo today will be buyer direct, will not be service provider. Continuing on through setup. So when you set up, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but just some understanding some criteria. When you get this thing set up and stood up, some of the configuration goes into creating the buyers. So an AP business unit is set up as your buying entity. So when you see buyer on these screens, it's not a person. It's not one of your actual users that's buying stuff. It's actually just the business unit. Buyer users, on the other hand, are your internal team members that have access to perform those buying activities, and they will be registered then under obviously their buyer business unit. You also have your suppliers. Obviously, you have a supplier list today. Existing suppliers can be established as eSettlement suppliers via batch process or an online page. So they provide both a batch process or an online. Usually we run the batch process when you go live to kick all your current suppliers over to use eSettlements. If a supplier hasn't been configured as an eSettlement supplier, they will not have access. So turning this on does not magically make them capable to go into the portal and do transactions there. Even if you give them an account to get into the portal, they still have to be basically established as settlement suppliers. But again, there's a nice batch process or online page that converts them over today. So if you have thousands, you can just move them all at once. And then going forward using supplier registration, they automatically get set up as eSettlement suppliers when they register with the organization. Every supplier has a supplier administrator. That's one user on your supplier side that has the admin rights to basically control the supplier account. That also allows them to add additional members of their team. So once they've got established and you've got their administrator set up, if they want to have other members of their team come into your portal, they can create, obviously you can restrict this, but they can create additional accounts for their people, manage their own passwords, things like that. So that administrator is a valuable piece that, again, keeps workload off your desk and keeps it on your suppliers, let them manage their own team. And the transactions still, once you've set them up as eSettlement suppliers and they got access to the portal, they still can't do any transactions. So you have to have an agreement between the buyer and supplier. The agreement process is that as the buyer, you create the initial agreement, the supplier then approves that agreement, the buyer does another review and does final approval of the agreement, and then you have an agreement in place. Once an agreement's in place, transactions can start. The main pieces of an agreement are basically your payment terms. So you're coming to an agreement that these are going to be your payment terms with this supplier. And then once that agreement is set and been approved by everybody, now you can start to do transactions, i.e. they can enter invoices. All right, moving on to invoice entry options. So there are a number of ways to get invoices into the system, and this is kind of the great part of eSettlements is that you get so many options. The first one is obviously just self-service. They can just key them in online. So supplier users can go in, they can log into your portal, they can enter an invoice. There's a little screenshot at the bottom of what this looks like. I'm going to walk through one in a minute. And then Voucher Build creates vouchers from the invoices loaded by those supplier users. You can do PO or non-PO. So if you're not using PO, that's totally fine. They can still enter invoices. If you are using PO and they have their PO number, they can actually clone their invoice off the PO. So they don't have to remember all the details. They can pull up the PO and clone it. That's obviously a setting you can choose. So you can disable that if you don't want them doing that. You can set them up to be only one type or the other. So, but it is a nice, what we call PO flip method, where they can take a PO, flip it into an invoice automatically. So now you're reducing, one, you're not entering the invoice. Two, they're not even having to worry about it. They can just flip it from the PO. So everybody's process is faster and everybody's happy. And here's where I will show the process flow. So, because this the process flow actually shows this process right here. So this is, I like this slide. Because it shows kind of what eSettlements does and where it sits. And people don't often understand that. Organizations are typically like, oh no, I'm gonna have to do new AP processes if I implement this, I'm gonna have to change everything. It really sits here on its own slice between your purchasing, and again, you don't have to have purchasing, and your accounts payable. Nothing in your accounts payable process has to change here. Voucher Build is going to build these vouchers. Matching is going to occur. Improvements, payments are going to go out the door the same as they do today, however you get your invoices into the system. This just allows this slice of putting them in. And in this example, I've got them coming in through the self-service tile, dealing with dynamic discounting, negotiating the terms, and then kicking out to Voucher Build. So nothing on your payable side has to change, which is, again, what I said, this is an easy module to just stick in there, get up and running, give your suppliers some additional control. So, and again, if you have purchasing, you can follow that all the way from creating the PO all the way to the payment. If you don't have purchasing, they can still go in and just enter their invoices. So I think this sets a lot of clients at ease when they see it and they go, okay, it's its own thing that sits in between and kind of is a middleman between these modules. It is not going to massively change how I work payables today. Back to our slides. Moving on to the next method, in image 28, they implemented Excel uploads. So if you want to upload invoices via Excel sheet, you can do that. There is a delivered Excel sheet that allows you to enter them either via direct post. So if you've exposed your web services, you can actually directly from the sheet hit a button and boom, they go in the system. Or you can do an online XML upload, which you take the spreadsheet, it creates an XML file, you log in, this screen shown here, and you upload that file through the portal. So again, you don't have to expose your web services. So again, a security decision there from an infrastructure. whether you have exposed web services that you want to be able to hit directly from the spreadsheet, or whether you want to force them to go in and just upload that XML file. But the spreadsheet is nice enough to produce that XML file for you. I will show the spreadsheet real quickly. One thing I like about this is all of these configuration items. So when you first configure the worksheet for each supplier, you can set all these things up. You can specify values. You can set the default. You can allow whether or not they can change the default. You can set the sales tax and VAT fields for them. You can determine whether they can just create XML, as I just talked about, or whether they can hit your servers directly and instantly put the invoices in. And you can set up their kind of the chart fields configuration as well. So you can create one of these per supplier, or one generally that works for everybody, but you can definitely save them a lot of trouble and needing to know all these fields by populating them for them. And once it's configured, it's pretty simple, right? You got your invoice details here at a header and line level, and you got a button to send those invoices into the system if you're using that direct web service mode. If you're not, there's another button that appears here that allows you to save it as an XML file, go into the portal, and upload it. So great option if you're moving up from them manually entering them to allowing them to do a little more bulk loading. Lastly then, or not lastly, second to lastly, is automated loads. So there are delivered integration broker services to allow web service integrations. You can integrate with big systems. So if you got a big supplier that's sending you a bunch of invoices every day and you don't want them doing it via a spreadsheet, they don't want to go manually enter them, you can do these automated loads through web services. Data can be taken in either as base XML or CXML, which is an industry commerce XML standard out there. So a lot of organizations, a lot of software, that's out there today can automatically produce a CXML file or a CXML feed. So this really works, good for those clients that have something that they can just turn on using that industry standard. If not, they can also create their own XML files in the correct format and send them to your system via web services. So this loads those invoices automatically. They can run a batch job every night and kick all of those invoices into your system. So this is, again, a robust delivered service. So easy customize. If you have specific needs around those interfaces, there are lots of delivered web services that all work together, and you can choose where you plug and play as far as putting data into these. Finally, we have optical character recognition. I always leave this for last because, again, it's a take it or leave it. Some people love it, some people hate it. So in Image 18, they implemented OCR, which allows you to scan an invoice and bring it into the system. There are compatible OCR servers and infrastructures out there you can purchase that get your invoices, scan them in for you, and feed them into your system, or you can run that hardware yourself, and that feeds them directly into AP and eSettlements. So a lot of people that are, this bottom chart is kind of the progression we often see. If you're a small organization doing manual data entry today, you're like, hey, I want to do OCR because it's going to save me a bunch of time. I can scan my invoices. Then great. Then this is a great feature. We also see clients that are on OCR today, and they're like, hey, I got all this infrastructure, scanning these things in. I want to go to web services. I want to use the Excel upload. I don't want to have to get these invoices still manually. So it's kind of that middle choice where you're still getting paper invoices and you're getting them into the system. You're just doing it in a more kind of automated way. And again, that OCR service is using the same web services that your suppliers can use to bounce directly into the system as far as feeding invoices. Lastly, invoice and payment inquiry. Suppliers can review invoice and voucher payment details. So they can go into the portal once they've entered invoices and see them. They can see payments when they've been issued. They can see disputes. They have visibility to any match exceptions that occurred between the PO. If there's any payment holds, they can see those. And again, reduces that need to contact your AP team. Hey, did you get this invoice? Hey, when's the payment going to be sent? All this stuff can be seen in their portal and save them all that trouble of reaching out to your team. There's also the supplier dashboard, which provides a centralized dashboard for those supplier users. It's not in the fluid tiles you'll see when we get to it. We're going to show this, but it is a nice little dashboard that provides a centralized place that you may want to. A lot of organizations create a tile for it because it is kind of a nice central point for your suppliers when they're logging in to kind of see all the payments they have, all the invoices they have, what's been paid and what hasn't. So, especially useful for those bigger suppliers. Finally, additional features. Again, we talked about dynamic discounting a little bit already. Allows you to group invoices and create discounted payment terms. Can be supplier or buyer driven. So either the supplier can make a recommendation about a discount or the buyer can make a recommendation about a discount. But just coming to an agreement that, hey, we'll pay you on different terms if we agree to pay, at a discount. So you'll say 5% off, and if we agree to pay these now, kind of thing. And so you can set those terms and negotiate those terms in the application itself, going back and forth between the supplier and the buyer through messages and through setting that a proposal up and going through the approvals of it. Again, some clients love it, some don't.
Sorry.
Good.
So I had a quick question about this. Sorry. Does this make like short payments? Is that what this has in mind? Like, what if there's a short payment? Is that what this is pertaining to? Or is this specific to like at the time of when it talks about dynamic discounting?
So this is just basically it allows you to create a proposal. In that proposal, you'll just basically say, hey, I owe you all these invoices, and I'm saying I'm going to pay you in 60 days. Can I get a 5% discount if I pay you in the next 10 days, kind of thing, right? I'm going to change the payment terms in exchange for a discount.
Okay.
It usually comes with some kind of grouping. Usually like, we're going to agree to pay you these 10 invoices now sooner than we would have paid them otherwise if you give us a discount. That's really all I can handle.
So here's another thing that it kind of goes along. It would be an additional feature. I haven't seen it yet, but does eSettlements offer the ability to do partial payments? So let's say we have an invoice that has 100 lines on it and 99 of those lines match perfectly, and so there's no dispute about it. We should pay the vendor, but we have one line that doesn't match, and so we need to talk about it, right, with the vendor.
Yep.
And it's not so much that the partial pay is impossible. It's just that then once the exception is cleared, I think it's very difficult for our accounts payable team then to go back and issue a payment on that same invoice once that line is cleared. And so I'm not sure. I was hoping that maybe, and I haven't seen it yet, but I was hoping that maybe there was some kind of functionality within eSettlements that would allow us to finally start doing that.
Yeah, it does allow payments, partial payments. You are correct. But there's nothing special in eSettlements. Again, your AP process, once that voucher's out there, is going to be the same. So I'm not aware of anything in the eSettlements suite itself. Now, there is a process to create those payments automatically based off what comes in through eSettlements. And I know that one can choose to do partials. And also when they PO flip, they can do partial lines. They can, when you get an invoice, you can choose to just pay partial lines. And we'll probably see a couple of those when we demo that will show where some of the lines are paid and some are not because they're in dispute. So that is possible, but you're probably going to deal with some of the same headaches you have today as far as going back and getting that voucher closed, because that is still a pain point.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, Randy, that once the voucher is created, if all of those lines are on the voucher, I think, wouldn't it be the AP would be in the same case where they would have to, it would be a case where they would have to delete some of the lines off of it, because you can't partially pay the voucher. But I could see, whereas eSettlements, if they were to select specific lines, but once it's on the voucher, it's on the voucher.
Correct. Yep.
So it does have, So
I would just like to pause the conversation here. We've got less than 30 minutes left, and I just want to make sure Randy can get through the rest of the material. I think this is great conversation, and I think we need to just pause it now until we can get to the Q&A.
Yeah, and we can take that discussion offline because that is a bigger discussion. Okay, I just took a note. We'll get back to that if we have time in the Q&A. If not, we can take that offline for sure. Okay, so again, talking about dynamic discounting, let's move back down to workflow. Again, fully integrated workflow is a really nice part of this. From approving your suppliers all the way to approving those invoices that come in to get paid. You can also auto approve them. So if you just want to issue payments automatically, you can set rules around that, obviously, so that you're only auto paying certain amounts for certain suppliers. That workflow is fully integrated in there, and you can build it out with the workflow engine, and then also notifications are built in throughout. So buyers and supplier notifications can be configured. That's the second part of the agreement between your buyer and your supplier that I talked about earlier. One is payment terms. The second is how they'd like to be notified. So you come to an agreement of here's the things we're going to notify you for, and here's how we're going to do it. So they get automatic notifications if they want those turned on of payments being issued, disputes, things like that. So the notification system all completely built in. And integrated throughout the setup. All right, demo time. Let's go out to PeopleSoft and zip through this stuff real quick. We're at 25 minutes and I want to leave about 10 open, so we'll probably try to do this in about 15 minutes. So as I said earlier, your public facing portal is going to be external, and that has to take some configuration to set up. I've set one up here for one of our demo portals. So I've actually created a portal, and this is what your suppliers would see from the public side of things. So this is the public homepage. You'll notice I haven't logged into PeopleSoft yet. I didn't do anything. It automatically logs you in as a guest and gives you these tiles. They have the sign in button if they already have their supplier login. They also have some of this public stuff like we talked about, the events calendar. We can click on and see events that are upcoming. Useful if they're going to have outages type thing. Same thing with announcements. You can keep your suppliers up to date on anything specific to them, and they can get notifications when these things are produced as well. Again, not super fancy, but some public facing stuff. And then you have user registration. So here's where they can come in. If you're using bidders, they can request a bidder ID, but most of you are going to be using suppliers, so they can register here as a supplier, or they can request a user ID if they already have their supplier ID and their tax number. So if their organization's already out there, they just want a new user ID created, they can request that there. Again, you can turn these on or off and decide to use them or not. You don't have to offer these options if you don't want them requesting IDs or requesting to be a supplier through here if you already have a process. I'm going to do a register a supplier and zip through this quickly just to show kind of what these screens look like. So again, this is all configurable through a template. So you can come out here and set up a template, and there are going to be multiple templates. You can default these templates as well. But you configure that template to have all the fields that are on these train stops. So I'm going to do a couple tabs here of the business and kind of show. So this is the welcome. There's 7 steps. Then you identify information. So here they're going to put their tax number in. They're going to put their entity number in. You can set up all these profile questions to ask them about their organization, industry codes. And again, all of these fields can be turned on or off at the configuration level with no real customization. They can do attachments here, their organization URL. Again, put in fake numbers here. I did one of these earlier, so let's make test 2 and go see if we can get to the second step. Oh, I did something wrong here. 9 characters, I thought I did. Oh, yeah, I did one already. In fact, I used that exact number, I guess. Let's do 8s. But you can see how the process kind of works and flows them through. Here they can put in their address. So and additional addresses down here for remit and invoice can be turned on. They get the contact step. They can set up a contact, and in here, when they set this first contact up, they can also request their user ID that they want for the system, so they can log into the portal. So this is that portal creation. Again, you can turn this off, but this allows them to get a portal submitted. And this, when they go through this registration, will automatically create them as eSettlement suppliers. There's no need to convert them over. When they come through this process, it's automatic. It's the primary contact. Oops. Let's test in here. Okay. So they can add as many contacts as they want, as many addresses as they want, get to their payment information. They can set their payment terms, the invoice addresses that they've chose, the remit addresses, if they put multiple addresses on there, their banking information, where their banks, banking numbers, all that information, it can all be configured here. By default, none of that's required, so I can skip it. Categorization, again, you can turn this on and off. If you categorize based on your strategic sourcing tree, that can be set up here. And then they can submit, and they have to agree to your terms and agreement too. So your legal team can set up a terms of agreement that they're agreeing to, and they'll get an email basically saying when they get approved, they'll get an email saying you've been approved. And so we can submit this request, and it's going to give them a registration ID, and they're going to get an email saying, hey, your registration has been submitted. Then you go through the approval process, and they'll get an email saying they've been approved. Here's their login to get into the portal. So Once they go through that process, they can also come out here and check that process. Once they have their number, they can go in here and see if they've approved it or not. But once they have all that, then they get their sign in, they get their administrator user set up, and they can go into the secure side. So I'm going to, let's see here. Click that. Grab my username and password here. So I've got one. This is one of the default demo users that they set up that has a lot of supplier information. So I just set his password to allow us in. And now they're in the secure side. So now they've flipped from the public facing side to the secure side. Now you'll see they have a lot of tiles for transactional stuff. Everything in eSettlements is this one. It's just invoice and payments. The rest of these you see are eSupplier, with the exception of the profile. Everybody with portal access has a profile. That's where you can change your passwords and set up additional users and make a change to your supplier change request to change your supplier information. But ASNs, receipts, PO acknowledgements, all this stuff is the supply chain eSupplier side. eSettlements is really focused around invoices and payments only. So we'll go into invoices and payments and take a look. So here's all the options we've talked about. One, you can message back and forth so they can have communication with you without getting on the phone. Here we can see their agreement. Again, we talked about earlier, you have to have an approved agreement. And that happens with each buying organization, which again is a business unit. So there's 4 of them here, but just to show examples of one, I'll pull up the US 100. And again, as I said earlier, the primary thing here is payment terms, right? That's really what the agreement is. The agreement has a few other fields like comments and whether they can copy from PO only, but the main agreement is just what are your payment terms, and then up here, what are your notifications? So how would you like to be notified when there's invoice load errors, when there's cash collections, when proposals are submitted, when they're accepted or denied, when a 1099 comes out, they can set up all of these specific, and you can default these and everything too. And you can actually make a master agreement that all suppliers get. If you don't want to do an agreement with each supplier, you want them to go off the master, you can do that as well. But they can see that in here at all times and then go in here to approve them. Once they've got that, then they can go play with all these things. So again, dispute resolution, you have your upload for Excel uploads, payment inquiry, invoice inquiry, and self-service. Let's look at self-service real quick. This is where they would go in to key an invoice in. I keyed this one in early. You'll see it's in here. I'm going to go ahead and key another one in. And this is really a simple page because it's just giving the invoice details here. There's 3 tabs on this. Give an invoice ID, and you can, select the buying organization if you have more than one business unit. You can get your requester here, what your supplier is, which is defaulting. You can have users that have more than one supplier. Their organization has maybe, is broken into many suppliers. For this one, there's just one of the defaults. Then you go to the invoice details, and here's where you have your options. So one, I can manually enter these. I can also copy them from the purchase order or through supply chain from a packing slip. So if I were to go to copy purchase order, here's where we call this PO flip. So I don't need to know all these details, right? I can go find one of my POs, I have PO number, I can search and find a PO. It's going to go ahead and again, here's where you can do partial lines. So I could choose to just invoice these lines separately from that PO, and it puts them automatically on here. So again, I don't have to add them. If I were to add lines manually, it's again a pretty simple screen. They go in here, they key in the information they have, quantity, unit measure, item ID, all of that stuff here, so they can do their own lines. Yeah, I didn't want to add that line, cancel. And then they can proceed on to the settlement information. So this is where the total, given me sales or tax, it goes on here, miscellaneous charges, and they can submit that invoice into your system just like that. Once it tells them once they've been submitted, they can't change it. So submitted successfully, and it shows up on this screen. This one went straight to creating voucher. That's because we did a PO flip. So because we have a PO already, it moved right to creating voucher. And again, there's configuration around that. The one I entered earlier, I entered the line manually, and it actually just says submitted. And that will flip from submitted once a batch job is run. So to get these invoices from eSettlements into your system, there is a batch job you need to run on a regular schedule, daily, couple hours, whatever, that grabs these and converts them over from submitted to ready to create voucher, which is where your voucher processing is now going to pick them up, create the voucher, and run them through, again, your normal day-to-day AP operations. So just submitted alone won't necessarily get them picked up out here, just something to keep in mind. And then go back and look at any of these at any point. They can come back in here, see the lines, dig down all the way to the line level, get the PO details if it, again, was flipped over from the PN or from the PO, and see those invoices. So that's how they get them in manually.
Randy, just real quick.
Sure.
Real quick, you said that when you flip it, it creates the voucher if it's a PO, so they don't hit the staging table or the QV tables. They just go right to. They bypass.
They still hit
staging tables.
They still hit QV staging. They still hit QV staging. Their eSettlements has its own staging tables that even sit before QV staging.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, so when you enter one with your own lines, it actually goes into an earlier staging table that then when you run that batch process, it moves them to QV staging, and then when you do voucher build, moves them forward. So
gotcha. Thank you.
There's another whole level. Yep. Invoice inquiry and payment inquiry we'll get to in a minute. That's where they can look at them. But again, in adding more, they can do upload invoices here. This is where they take that Excel sheet, they create an XML file, they load that XML file here. There's they choose a supplier, they choose to upload it, they get status reports on their file. I'm not going to load one from an Excel, but again, that Excel can be configured to go directly into the system or to do it this way where they load them online through an upload. Again, there is a batch process too. Once they upload those spreadsheets, they don't get processed instantly. It has to wait for a batch to run, and that batch job then picks those spreadsheets up and produces invoices. Once those invoices are produced there, then they can go to self-service invoicing and actually see them in here. Again, this is that early staging table, more or less, that I just talked about. Once they get the invoices in and they've been built out, we can go to invoice inquiry here. Again, these two are here already, just same as the last screen we saw where this one's in creating voucher already and this one is submitted. So just pull these up. I'll pull the submitted one I did earlier where I just bought one battery for $109. Payment terms, due date, everything on here. Again, they can drill down all day long. So they can drill down to the, there's no invoice details below this, but if there were, I could drill down to the line level at even more detail. Since I manually entered this line, there is no more detail. And then lastly, they have payment inquiries. So if they want to see where their payments are, and I've searched this one back to all the test data here. So this is where you can see ones that were voided, ones that were paid, what method they were paid for, and they can open these up to see at more detail level. So this shows which invoice was paid with this payment. So if you have a payment paying multiple invoices, they can see which ones it paid. They can click into the invoice to go at a deeper level, gives them the invoice line and the scheduled payments against that invoice individually. So here's where I think you're saying that, you could have multiple payments hitting one invoice, splitting them out. So, but I think that has to be split out before it gets to AP. But again, we can take that offline. But you'll see in this case, 4 payments were issued against this one invoice. Okay, let me check my notes here. That's the majority of what we wanted to show here. Make sure I didn't have anything else. I know we did not show the supplier dashboard yet. That was the last thing we were going to talk about. So again, supplier dashboard, if we go back to the home page here, it takes me back to my secure home page. It doesn't have a tile out here. Don't really know why they never did that. Almost every client that's implemented this just puts a tile out there because it makes sense. But you can get to all of the tile stuff through the menu as anywhere else in PeopleSoft. But under eSettlements, the supplier dashboard is right here. And supplier dashboard for a while wasn't very fluid. It is now fluid, so I don't know why they don't have a tile for it, but this is what that dashboard looks like. So again, for your bigger suppliers that might find some use in this, they can get a general summary of their balances, their past dues, disputes, proposals. They can see the invoices in detail, customer detail here. They get a chart down here, and they can see like their last 10 payments here at the bottom. And so just kind of typical dashboard type stuff where they kind of drill down here and get more detailed information. This is a full invoice inquiry search here, so just put them in another search screen to search through invoices. And I think this uses a slightly different one than the one we looked at through the tiles. So I think that's why eSettlements kind of now gears you away from the dashboard and wants you to just use this page. But the dashboard is out there and can be configured with the pretty charts and stuff. So it is an option. All right, so yeah, we're basically to the Q&A section. That was what I wanted to cover with 10 minutes left, which is perfect. There's contact information on here for myself and our managing partner, John Kovac, as well as partner Charlie Stegman. So if you need to contact us, there is a recording of this. The slides are available as well. And if you have any detailed question follow-ups and you don't want to ask them in the next 10 minutes, feel free to reach out to any of us and we'll get you in touch with the right person. They'll probably send you to me and we'll filter through your questions and figure out how we can help. But we'll open it up at this point. Were there any questions in the chat? I don't think so. All
No questions in the chat.
right, so we'll just open it up. Does anyone have any questions?
Hey, Randy, if once you set up the eSettlements and suppliers go into like the payment inquiry, would they see any and all payments, even ones before you had eSettlement set up, or only ones that are processed through there?
They will see anything, even if it's older. Yep.
Thank you.
That's kind of why in that search, I had to take that search back to 1900. So with the demo data, a lot of that was really old payments because demo is really old, but the data wise. So yeah, they can see any payments. Once they've been flipped over, they get full access to see, you know, anything that's occurred with their supplier.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, quick question. Is this application pulling data out of the ERP system? So will it flag any duplicate entries?
Yes, it absolutely will. Both on the supplier registration as well as then again, you know, it goes through your normal AP matching process as far as trying to match to POs if you're using POs. So that's where you would get a duplicate if you entered a duplicate PO number. It would catch that you've already created an invoice for that PO. And then again, on supplier registration, there's also duplicates there where if you try to register a supplier that's already in your system, it can throw an error and say, hey, we've already got that tax ID set up. We don't need to create a new supplier for you. So yeah, it will prevent duplicates. And then again, most of it's then your AP matching where you're going to catch most of your duplicate transactions. And that's, you know, going to work as it does today, whatever matching you're using.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Could I clarify? So if you have an existing supplier already registered with an ID and everything, then that supplier just needs to request a ID?
So
user ID?
yeah, so when a supplier that exists today gets flipped over to be an eSettlement supplier, that initial supplier administrator will be set up at that point. They have to have an administrative user and they'll get access. They'll get an email saying, here's your login info. Additional users can then request additional IDs to be added.
Okay.
So as part of the flip, it automatically registers their first user, and that user can also go in and create additional users for their organization. So but yeah, if they, and again, to go in and create a user ID, they have to request, they have to have their supplier ID already and their tax ID number to ask for that. But again, once they have an admin, their admin can do that for them if you allow that. So that's usually the easier way to go and let them manage their own account so you don't have to be taking that through your security team.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. And it doesn't matter if they have, you know, we get EDI invoices through a clearinghouse. They would be able to see all of their invoices.
Correct. It's not just invoices
Regardless
that
of
came in
type.
through eSettlements. They'd have full access to see anything that came in through any other method. Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Could I ask, for those suppliers that are allowed to input invoices, how does eSettlement address invoice attachment, the actual invoice itself?
So yeah, so that first screen that we went through for invoice entry has an attachment section there they can click on and attach anything they want to the invoice. And then it's going to appear, you know, on the normal invoice attachment screens in AP when you review those invoices. So invoice inquiry is going to show that attachment.
Is it a required attachment or is it an optional?
It is not required. I don't know if you can require it with configuration. I know you can require an attachment for supplier registration through config, but I don't know if you can require an attachment for invoices. It is optional, I believe. I've seen customizations to require it though.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, well, then we'll give everybody 6 minutes back, and I'll get in touch with the parties that have the questions about partial payments and see if we can figure out more on that front offline.
Thanks, Randy. Great job.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.